This is just a short demonstration of the capabilities of the Interpredata software suite. So what we're going to go and look at is some seafood samples. So the purpose of this is to classify unknown samples. So I'm going to go ahead and click on classify. So we've got seafood here. We've got on the configuration side, we're looking at our artificial intelligence, and we've got neural network parameters in here, and also using linear discriminant analysis. So a little bit about that later on. But the purpose of this is to identify a farm location from an unknown sample. So I'm going to go ahead and select the category I need to interpret, which is farm ID. Go ahead and click apply filters. So while that's loading, let's have a quick look at what we've got here in terms of farms. We can see we've got 6 farms, each we have 30 known samples, and in here we've got a couple of unknown samples. So what we want to do is we're going to pick a sample, and we're going to perform a linear discriminant analysis on that sample. Now that sample that we're running, we're using all the elements. There's roughly about 65 odd elements that we use depending on the data types and the sample sizes we use. So we also have a neural network, and the neural network will need to be tuned for each sample set. So what we see here is an initial prediction, farm 1, on that sample 83. So if we have a look down here, our unknown sample, and hover over our unknown sample, we can see we know the country, but we don't know which farm it is. And given this farm 1, this clustering around farm 1, and farm 2 is quite close as well. So while I'm running that, I'm just going to kick off the neural network to give you an indication. But when we look at this component as well, we can see there's 30 of these analytes are completely linked to, so that's just the 30 analytes completely linked to that specific farm for our unknown sample. So if we look at the compliance. So at this point in time, we can very clearly differentiate between farm 1 and farm 2. So only 13 analytes versus 30. So it's a very compelling case. So if we look at farm 1 and farm 2, since we know they're quite close together, and we look at the elemental fingerprint for both of these farms, we'll see that they are quite close once it's loaded. Right, so let's scroll down, have a quick look. So now you can see farm 1, this is our unknown or unclassified sample versus the fingerprint for farm 1, and you can see it's pretty much a match. So these are a log 10 scalar. So that specific element that we've got here that's slightly low, lower, it's in, if you look at the smaller scales, we're talking about around 2 parts per billion. So in this case, we can see that there's quite low on this end and very high, so there's quite a big discrepancy. So in this case, we would say definitely the difference between farm 1 and farm 2, and then our analyte is clearly depicted over here. So we can clearly distinguish between the 2 farms, although they're both sitting very close to each other. Now another feature that we can do is we can click on the 3D view, and because sometimes when you look at certain things, these 2 farms appear very close to each other, but in a 3D scalar type and a 3D environment, it's much easier to move around and clearly see that difference between the clusters on our linear discriminant analysis. So once that loads, and we're quite confident, we'll just go up here and replace that value. So here we go. So there's our unknown value. in pink there. And when you scroll around, you can actually see that the separation is very clear. So we are very confident in this case that sample here, which is our unknown sample, belong to our farm 1. Okay, so there's a blue sample, farm 1, very close to each other. So in the case of our neural network, it agrees, it's very confident in this case, that farm 1 or our unknown sample do belong to farm 1. So in this case, what we'll go ahead is we'll just click on replace this value with a predicted value from our LDA, replace, and it will allocate that. And it's now part of our known data set for seafood samples.